Welcome to LeCorner, La Source's digital show dedicated to the sport and entertainment industry. Every 2 weeks, we invite a professional to share their experience, background, and challenges. The sport industry moves fast, and having their insights is the best way to keep up to speed. Welcome to LeCorner.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to a new episode of LeCorner from La Source. We're very much happy to have you here, and we're happy today to be with Kevin Hall, one of my former UEFA colleagues, and we've been driving a long way since then, and Samuel. But hi guys, how are you guys doing?
Hey JB, good to see you again. Doing very well, and good to meet you, Sam.
Yeah, nice to meet you too. Great to be here again for another episode.
Yeah, Kevin, that's been quite a long time. We were remembering back on the pitch in Lyon, like kicking the ball from time to time during the lunch break. That was quite good moments actually, but we'll not too much into details about this. For the people that are listening to us, and we are pleased, like we know we have more and more weeks after weeks, but can you briefly present yourself, Kevin, from just like personal backgrounds and professional as well?
Yeah, of course, happy to. So my name's Kevin Hall. I currently work for a sponsorship consultancy called the Value Xchange. And my career, I'll explain and come on a bit more about what we do in a second. But my career has generally been in media and sports sponsorship. So I started off when I left uni. I went into media sales with Channel 5 in the UK, and was there for 6-7 years before stumbling into the sports industry, because I'm a huge football fan, and
was it a dream? Did you want it to work into the sport industry, or was it by coincidence? Or
I'd love to say it was a big plan, but actually coincidence. Because I'm a football fan. My team in England is Reading, which is a rubbish team in England. And like most people, was at lunchtime reading the team news or whatever on the website, seeing what was going on. And I noticed there was a job going for a business development manager at the club. And it got me thinking. I was like, okay.
Why not?
Why not? Let's give it a go. And I'm obviously from that area originally. So I thought, yeah, go for it. And then one thing led to another, got the job.
So from Channel 5, you moved to Reading. So
yeah, exactly.
From the TV to a football club.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
How was the transition?
Good and bad. I guess good in the sense I could bring a lot because I sort of understood generally how advertising and marketing worked. That sounds a bit arrogant, but I kind of understood sort of how the agency world and brands and how it sort of fits together. But then it was quite a clash because going to a club like Reading is quite a small club and it's quite a local club. So the expectations were very different. It was quite a different experience. Enjoying.
In terms of like professional like skills required, or is it just the culture between more, like a big
Probably more the culture side that was different. The skills are the same because it was generally a sales or business development type roles on both sides, so the skills that you have stand you in good stead, and quite a lot of people end up going from media sales into sports sponsorship, I find. So yeah, the skills are fine. It was just more the culture, I guess, of going from sort of central London to a smaller club outside of London was interesting, and it was great because we were in the Premier League at the time, but we got relegated that season, so it very quickly changed from, hey, we're selling the Premier League to relegation into the next division. So it was, you learned a lot.
Did you stay for the next season after, or?
I stayed for a bit. I stayed for a couple of years. So I stayed for most of the next season. So I kind of got one experience in the Premier League and one experience.
And how was it like Premier League and then being like second division?
Well, I guess in
your daily job, in terms of, you were saying like we were selling the Premier League, and then I think it's no longer the case. So how did you manage that, or how did you?
I guess the interest just naturally falls off because all the local businesses it was a novelty at that stage. It was the first time the club had been in the top division. So the novelty of seeing Man United, seeing Liverpool, seeing all these teams play was massive, and the demand was huge across hospitality and advertising and things. And then when you drop back down to the Championship, the demand just goes away, and it means that you have to be nice, remember to be nice to the local businesses that support the club, which I think is a challenge. A lot of teams who go up and down have that challenge of keeping their existing businesses happy, which is really important, and not sort of pricing them out of the market.
Okay, cool. And then I'm just fast forwarding your career, but after that you moved directly to UEFA, or
no, I went to the FA, to the English FA.
All right.
So I joined there in a role focused on biz dev and licensing, and then onto partnerships as well. So I was there 4 or 5 years, managing England.
So from TV you moved to biz dev, and from there you've been always into sponsorship, licensing, and this world, right?
Yeah, exactly. Sponsorship, both the sales side and management side, and licensing as well. Then from the FA to UEFA, looking after UEFA's national team competition sponsorship.
Mm-hmm. So for the Euro mainly?
Exactly. So Euro 2016 was the big project.
One question for you, actually, because I'm assuming there were a lot of differences moving from writing, as I mispronounced it, to the FA. Is the way the FA is structured and your position over there very similar to the way that UEFA operates, or was it a very big transition moving from a national federation to an international one?
It was quite similar, probably more similar, because the FA is quite a big association in terms of number of staff, and they're quite well organised and things. So it wasn't such a big transition. I guess the big difference was more of a cultural thing, just working across nationalities and across Europe, and more of a global and European perspective. So dealing with sponsors for the FA was largely sort of England team sponsors who are focused more on England, clearly, whereas you're dealing with the HQs of McDonald's, Coke, etc. So it gives you a great global perspective. And also getting to deal with all the different other federations, and at UEFA was great as well. So.
And local club, I mean, a smaller club to one of the leading federations and one of the oldest as well. How is that? I mean, did you have a big gap, or not that much?
No, not really such a big. I didn't really find it too much of a gap, to be honest. I think it's just more down to personalities, and there's not a big skills gap, because if you know what you're doing and you can apply it to different scenarios, I think.
Yeah. All right. And one of the questions I had before I forget is you mentioned UEFA and your role in terms of like national team. I know there were the Nations League. So were you involved as well in? I'm maybe deep diving in or like diverting a little bit from what I had in mind, but I mean, Nations League is a new competition for national team, and you were part of it, I guess. So how was it like? I mean, from just like, you know, the Euro has an history, we'll have 60 year, but a Nations League, like at the beginning, no one really knew about it, understood the format or anything, or the Final Four. For you, how the experience was like?
I'll answer your question in a second, but I'll go back a step one more, because the reason I joined UEFA was also because of the European qualifiers, which were centralised. So that was why the role came up, and the reorganisation of European football. So I sort of had that experience from the start with European qualifiers being centralised and kind of creating a competition in inverted commas. And
so for those who are listening to us and don't know, is like in the past or before it was centralized, like each national team was having the rights to actually go and sell their matches or their friendlies or their official matches. But then after there's been decisions to centralize it at UEFA level to make it more consistent, a bit like what we're doing with the Euro. And so that's how the job came in, and that you were hired for UEFA, right?
Yeah, correct. So it's similar experience. Obviously, the qualifiers was a bit more complicated, and then Nations League came about but the similarities are both huge education pieces, because when you're trying to explain or sell it, they're both quite complicated. And as many videos or slides that you go through, it's quite hard to get your head around. And you certainly saw
People don't understand it, yeah.
No, but what's interesting, I think, with the Nations League, in hindsight, because I left before it was launched, so I had I think it was all the complicated bit pre-launch, because you're trying to explain it. How does this work? And the media are trying to get their head around it. Who plays who and what happens? But once football starts, people kind of get it and they see the benefit.
And then they know and they see it and they have seen the Final Four and they understand the version of it. And now they know, they have seen the trophy as well and they understand it.
Yeah. I mean, generally I think it's clearly a good thing making more competitive matches and more friendlies, but it's still a challenge because you still have the challenge of national team football. I think generally there's a big thing of interest, certainly in England, of people when international football comes about. People are almost the Premier League's not on. There's that kind of feeling. So it's really important to keep investing in national team football, and that's a bigger project than just me.
And how long do you think sorry, Sam, I'm just thinking because you said pre-launch was even more important, but how long did it take actually, in terms of putting all this together, educating, raising awareness about it prior to launch? How long did it take?
Good question. I can't remember. It must have been a good year or two because again, I was a small part of it on the sponsorship side. Clearly, then you've got the wider marketing team, competition teams, all educating and promoting in different ways. I mean, clearly marketing, promoting to consumers as well as the media guys to media to explain, but then competitions, all the teams and players taking part. So it's a kind of team effort across different things.
18 months to 24 months, more or less, at least.
Yeah, I'd say something.
Yeah,
I'd say.
Okay. Sam, did you have something to add on that, or?
It was basically the same question, but just one question that makes sense, I believe, is how is it structured? So UEFA organizes everything. Was there some reluctance at the beginning from the different associations, especially the strong ones that maybe were making good enough revenue or were scared that they would have a smaller cut of the revenue once UEFA came in and decided to centralize the organization of this league?
Yeah, so for the European qualifiers, the media rights were all centralized, and then the sponsorship rights were either not centralized at all, so the big federations kept all their rights. Some gave half their rights, so the medium ones, and some gave them all to UEFA. So it was a challenge of sort of packaging them up into a saleable sponsorship property. So does that answer the question?
Yeah, absolutely. And it was maybe around the Nations League that I was also discussing it, because I understand the qualifications are probably smaller. So the interest, there's a rationale in giving some liberty there, and in centralizing afterwards, probably realizing that the organizations aren't doing a good enough job. But around the Nations League, it feels like there were a lot of pretty tier one friendly matches, which I believe most of the income was coming to the federation. How did you convince the big national federations to actually support that initiative?
Yeah, good question. Probably one slightly above me at UEFA, if I'm completely honest. But I think the arguments of improving football and clearly making the most of national team football were key. And clearly a revenue thing, because of centralised revenues and increasing the overall pot for the game, it comes into play as well. So kind of those two main themes, I think.
On this one, Sam, I think the idea is more to say by joining forces, you increase the size of the cake, and actually the tier one will get even more of what they are having. And the tier two or tier three national associations, call them the way you want, but will also get more. So actually by joining forces, you just increase the size so that you make sure even when you redistribute, they still have an incentive to go in. And actually the value as well of the competition makes it more attractive as well from a pure on-pitch side of things.
Yeah, 100%. Just from it, but it's good to know that even for a Nations League, that strategy created more revenue for each federation, because the assumption could have been that the bigger ones would have been making more money by themselves, organizing their own friendly matches, rather than having centralized, because you could have thought that money was redistributed to smaller federations, but not. So it's an easy conversation, actually.
Yeah, it's an easy one, but part of the rationality behind it, or that was also one of the use case or one of the reasons to do it, is like once you centralize, you make it. You have a better product, and so you can also like increase the sale. So that's the idea behind it as well. And so actually, even the smaller associations get more if they were alone. So the idea is more to say, okay, we are partners. So the idea is more behind this. Okay, Kev, just like UEFA and everything in football, from a club to national associations. I mean, you've been climbing the ladder, and then you moved back to London, right?
Yeah.
You left UEFA and you moved back to London, still in the same role. I think you left like 3 years ago, something like that.
Yeah, I think so, something like that. How time has flown, but yeah, I stayed within sponsorship, but moved sports. So I joined the motorsports and joined the world of Formula E.
All right. How is that different, actually?
Quite different.
We have Formula E and Alpine on our podcast recently. But
okay, cool. So I saw actually. Yes, I joined a team called Neo. Have you heard of Neo?
Yeah.
They're a big Chinese electric vehicle manufacturer. So in Europe, not many people have heard of them. So I won't be offended. But in China,
I did my desk research. I did a bit of desk research live.
Yeah, no, I knew you would, but just for the listeners, I knew you. So yeah, they're a huge Chinese electric vehicle company, and I was responsible for heading up partnerships for the Formula E side of the Formula E team, which was based in the UK. So very different, because sponsorship was kind of new almost. Obviously, the team had been established.
To them?
Yeah, to them as an organisation, it was a very new organisation generally. Excuse me. So rather than going from somewhere like an FA or UEFA, where sponsorship is very much part of the bottom line, everyone knows it and understands it, it was kind of starting from scratch and trying to educate and develop things, and so it's very different.
Processes in place, and okay. And it was just like, it was not just advising, it was also like managing the sales and the whole process, I guess.
Yeah. So when I first joined, it was focused on sales, but then after about 6 months or a year, I just took over all the partnerships management as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
So very, very good experience. And Formula E, very different sport, because it's new and they can do different things and adapt, and it's probably unlike.
To which extent it's new? Because we all hear about the booster and all this kind of new stuff in terms of like rewarding the fan or making them more at the core. And from where you've seen it, to which extent is it really new or truly innovative, or trying to change a bit, like not the format in itself, but trying to change things in terms of rewarding and engaging the fans?
Yeah, I think you've just mentioned the main things really, like the fan, but like ways that fans can actually have an impact on the sporting event is pretty rare.
Right. All right.
So doing things like that and just trying to be innovative is something I can't really imagine a football or a rugby or a cricket doing, because there's so hundreds of years of history, and then changing the rules of the game would probably not happen. So they definitely do things like that. But then on the flip side, motorsport sponsorship, I found, can be quite reliant on logos and badges and B2B business as well. So it's kind of a clash of both worlds, of sort of forward facing, but motorsport can be sort of overly reliant on branding and awareness, I think, as well.
Okay, I see. And then so from football and all the ladder, motorsports, and then now rugby, or you have different clients. I guess it's multi-sports, or you have different clients.
No, exactly. So my role now is for a consultancy called the Value Xchange.
All right.
And we're if I give you the history, basically, we were set up about 5 years ago by a guy called David Peters, who originally set up Cara sponsorship, sort of back in the day. So Cara, big media agency, and then transitioned into MKTG as well. So his background is very much on advising brands on sponsorship, building sponsorship strategies and things. And his business partner, a guy called Jamie Wilson, came on board a couple of years ago. And his background is Perform and DAZN, and also media with ITV and Channel 5. So kind of digital brand point of view.
More on the data and digital side of things.
Exactly. And what they found increasingly is obviously when they were working on briefs from brands and then going to sports, they would get responses back from sports, which were some good, some bad, but kind of average. And they thought, well, why don't we sell on behalf of sports as well and bring our knowledge of brands and digital into how we sell things? And I knew the guys over the years from different things. And then we started talking last summer. And I started sort of back end of last year, September, October time, to launch a rights owner sales side.
Cool. Okay, you are helping me a lot, because that's the perfect transition. I mean, if I invited you here, it's mainly like I've told you, is how we've moved from sponsorship to partnerships. And just like the story you've been saying is like the Value Xchange, so the value in terms of, okay, maybe we can better help rights holders or sports organizations in terms of how we deliver or package the rights and how do we activate them. And I remember there is something written which is like creating winning partnerships for brands and rights owners. So I guess for me is like, why is that important? And I mean, you've answered it in terms of like the co-founders have seen the value, but I would like to hear from you in terms of like, why is that much important today, like for sports organizations?
Well, it also goes back to our name as well, a Value Exchange, that because we think there's give and take on both sides. I think to create a winning partnership, both sides have got to have a vested interest in it succeeding. It can't just be, do you want to buy this for 20 million? And then I don't really care if it works. It's got to be, how does it work? Do we align in terms of values and what we're trying to achieve? And in
terms to this end, I'm a bit digressing again, but does this mean it has changed a bit the timeline in terms of like it's less short-term partnership or just like eyeball or boards, and it's more like a long-term partnership, or does it has no effect necessarily on the timeline or the length of the partnership?
To be honest, I think both. I don't think there's a clear answer. I think if you're looking at huge, big partnerships of big sporting properties, that clearly they're going to be long-term and have huge long-term objectives. But that's not to say other sports might be a bit more short-term and opportunistic. If you're just looking at a media buy to get quick brand awareness, then you might want to buy something that is just built around branding and LED boards and things. So it depends on the objectives of the sponsor as well, to be honest. And I think that's what we saw, is a lot of sports federations and teams were just selling, do you want package A, B, C, and D, rather than thinking, okay, I'm talking to this brand, what do they want? How do I shape it? And how do I do it? And a lot of people claim to do it, but don't think they really do
it. Okay.
Yeah. So
that's the massive change, like in terms of, for long in the sport industry, was, okay, we have these kind of packages for sponsors, whether you take it or not. And now it's a bit like, okay, how do we make it like a win-win? And if you come to us, it's because you have these objectives. So how do we help you achieve those KPIs or those objectives?
Exactly.
More or less that.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
All right.
Actually, is that one thing that's common now, that brands come to you saying, okay, we have an objective, or we come with a technology which believes can help us achieve that? Like, say an organization is interested in gathering more first-party data for their internal usage. Is that something that often happens, or is it more you put together the packages and you pick out of those what is the most convenient to the interested sponsor?
Well, we'll sit down with the brand or the prospect and create a brief together over what they're trying to achieve and what their objectives are, and then just try and work out what the best platform or property is to achieve those objectives. So it's that simple.
So you usually have enough bandwidth to actually do that kind of workshop, that exchange of thought process, then find the right technology and then deploy it for the next cycle. You have enough ahead time to be able to follow that workflow.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, for me, like being on the data side, how much the partnership now instead of the sponsorship as it used to be done, like has helped maybe sports organizations to be more data driven? Is it something that actually brands have helped a lot sports organizations to be like aware of and to understand, because they came in and they were like, okay, our goal or our metrics are X, Y, Z, and how can you help us delivering those? And so actually, instead of saying, okay, you will be on all the boards or on television on the air and there's this amount of audience or blah, 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 how can maybe it's more around the engagement, or maybe like Sam mentioned it, first party data. So on the data side, what is the impact of brands on sports organizations, and to which extent that matters today?
I think they've had a huge impact, and it matters hugely is the short answer.
You have many brands coming to you, because I guess that's a bit the questions from Sam in terms of, do you have a lot of technological or big platforms brands coming and say, we have these products, or we have these KPIs in terms of data, how can we use sports properties to achieve those, or not?
Not personally, not over the clients that we've been dealing with over the last few months, I'd say. But I know it, sort of going back to the original question, I think brands have forced rights owners to move quicker and develop things in data that they probably wouldn't have done unless they'd been under pressure to get those deals done. And COVID has only accelerated that, because fan data and fans not being in the stadium has meant they've had to rely on other streams of revenue. I think it's also the challenge for rights owners is is investing the right amount of money and resource into data, because someone like a UEFA or the bigger football clubs have those resources, whereas smaller ones don't necessarily have it and understand it well enough. That's the key thing, I think, for me. So certainly at UEFA, they had a sort of data strategy, and it was crucial in terms of delivering partners such as Booking.com and Expedia and these which were just centered on data, and wouldn't have been done if there wasn't a data
proper data. Yeah. Okay. I was about to ask you, do you have concrete examples? So you just mentioned Expedia or Booking.com in football with UEFA. Do you have others, or would you be willing to explain? I mean, for some of our listeners, sometimes it's a bit like, we talk about it, but we don't know really what's behind, or what is the strategy, or what are the needs, or why Booking.com is coming to a UEFA, or maybe you have other examples in other industries.
No, of course. I think Booking is one of the best examples, without going into anything too confidential. Mm-hmm. Their importance to UEFA was around travel and accommodation, and clearly around the Euros you have millions of people trying to access tickets, so not just the actual ticket buyers, but millions who are trying to access it, and that presents a huge opportunity for Booking to target them with hotel and travel solutions. So it was a perfect way to
to be the lending platform for all these people traveling during the Euro. Exactly.
So it was perfect for the sort of 15, probably the numbers are even bigger now, but it was around about 15 million or maybe more that were trying to access tickets to Euro. So it's a perfect way for them to target those fans.
Okay. Have you seen similar deals in the sport industry, like maybe with other rights holders? Or
I've seen it with similar deals with them and Expedia doing similar things with other rights owners as well.
There is a very interesting, now that you explain it, there is actually a very interesting collaboration between Airbnb and the IOC actually around the next Olympics, where for those exact same reasons, it makes a lot of sense for an Airbnb to put the big bucks against it. Because one thing that's also hard to understand from an external perspective is how do they measure the ROI around such big investments? So I'm assuming the COVID situation is probably harmful to our Airbnb, but somehow, I'm assuming they're still getting the value out of it because they proceeded with the collaboration regardless of the situation.
No, and that's a really good point you mentioned, because that industry is so built on ROI and tracking, and they develop all their own tools and their analytics and things. And they can very quickly model, okay, if we get this many ticket buyers, and they can work out the maths behind it to see if it's rather than just purely,
if it's worth it or not.
Exactly. Yeah. Rather than, I can get this much media value on the boards, which does X, Y, Z, which again, that has a return in itself, though, if you're driving brand awareness, clearly. But it just opens up.
It's less informed, or it's less data driven, or proven by the data in terms of clicks or conversion rate or stuff like that.
Exactly. And I know, and again, a couple more with, I know certainly at UEFA dealing with the likes of Coke and Panini during the Euro 2016 tournament. They had an online collaboration around trading cards, which was run on using UEFA data, which performed massively, really, really well compared to how Coke's expectations, and similar experiences on other sponsors who have collaborated on data and worked together, getting much better results using rights owner data rather than the brand data.
And actually, now that you're involved in the Rugby League World Cup in 2021, so much smaller scale, very different type of organization, and so obviously sponsorship that would probably be very different than the brands that we have been mentioning right now. How much is it the same job or a very different one, because the needs on the other side aren't the same? And are you regardless selling some packages for traveling for the traveling industry in the same kind of similar way, or are you targeting really different types of brands that are looking at more exposition and brand awareness?
Yeah,
because it's too complicated to do something else.
Exactly. And just for your listeners, so Rugby League World Cup is one of our clients, and we're selling sponsorship on their behalf. It's a good question. We sell it in a slightly different way. If this answers the question, we tend to focus more on the social impact of the tournament and the benefits it will bring to local communities. Because the tournament, we explain more about the tournament in the background, because it was hosted to bring change in deprived communities in the UK, which is why the UK funded it so much. So there's real clear metrics over how it's going to improve communities and improve people's lives. So a lot of what we do is finding partners that share this vision on social impact. And we also tell.
So you have a story behind the competition that helps you in terms of like bringing to life a partnership.
Correct. So it's slightly different from a. We don't really lean too heavily on the data side of things, because it's a slightly different event. We also lean heavily on other stories such as diversity and equality, because it's the first time ever that a major sporting event has hosted the women's, wheelchair and men's tournaments together. So that's another lens we use.
So you can have brands or partners coming to you that want to showcase a bit more in terms of diversity and in this space. And so,
correct. But then I guess it shows sports sell in different ways, and sports use different things depending on a brand's objectives, because also all the games are on the BBC in the UK. So that means actually from a media value point of view, it's pretty massive, because we'll have really good numbers. So if you are looking for brand awareness, we can tick that box. So the principal sponsor is a company called Kazoo, who you might be familiar with, or their secondhand.
My name.
The UK listeners will definitely be familiar. They're a secondhand car platform that sell online, and there's basically them and another player that have shaken up the market in the UK, and they've invested huge amounts in sponsorship across different sports. So every time you look at a sport business, you see Kazoo signs a deal, or their competitor Cinch signs a deal.
So there's a massive competitions between the two, which is good for the rights holder.
Exactly.
So the demographic from the rugby league, if we focus on this specific World Cup, it's very much UK. It's very much like it's primarily to target people within the UK, because you were mentioning like for big events like the Olympics or the Euro, it's international. We're talking in millions of fans all across the globe, and that's why you have a booking or an Airbnb. But here, it might not be as much into data, but still you have some specific target into a specific market for which some of the brands come in.
Yeah, I think UK is the most important because of where it's hosted. It's very much a global tournament because it features 32 teams and 21 nations. But rugby league interest is dominated by the UK, Australia and New Zealand are the three big markets for the sport. It has a big global audience. That the TV audience is like 150 million or something. So it does good numbers. But naturally, where we're based in the UK and the tournament's in the UK. So we're focusing on brands that are looking at the UK. We've also tried, we've tried a bit of outreach to Australian and New Zealand brands because the sport is huge down under.
And one thing checking out, and it sounds like you've been doing a very decent job because I see a lot of logos partnering with the competition. So I'm assuming also that in terms of the strategy, we know that, UEFA, FIFA, those big organizations really try to make those collaborations very premium, try to limit the number of potential partners. I see that there's a lot there. Is that a natural strategy for a smaller event to go after more logos, more sponsors for smaller tickets? Or was it a decision that was taken before actually reaching out to all those different brands?
There's not a strategy in place to have X number of sponsors. So we we also didn't really have a plan of, okay, we have tier A, B, C, and D. We wanted to go to the market and just talk to people and create partnerships based on what they're after. So I think that's probably the key differential, that when we talk to people, we say, well, these are some of the rights, but we don't know what you need. Let's create something together. And actually Kazoo is the principal partner, but that initially wasn't a level that we had in mind, but it just turned out that was really important for them. So we created that and developed it. All right. In terms of the other ones, I think.
And so it's very much tailor-made to a certain extent.
Correct.
Yeah. You go out and okay.
Correct. And the other partners have specific areas they help the tournament with or align with. So if there's logistics partner, we need logistics, or a legal partner that's very supportive on the legal side. So there's clear areas that we work with those sponsors on.
Is in-kind, so if I refer to those like in-kind services, is it huge part of partnerships today, or is it on the side, or does it depend on the scale of the competition and maybe of the deal you're doing? But do we have all these in-kind always present, and to which extent? I mean, I don't know the percentage or if there is any percentage, but I would be interested to know a bit more.
I mean, yes, definitely in place. In terms of a percentage, it's kind of impossible to say because it will vary by sport and by tournament and by team and by sector as well. I mean, some sectors will lend themselves more to in-kind products, but it's definitely important for the rights owner because they save budget for what they're trying to achieve, and clearly for the sponsor, it's always important to showcase their product being used and say, hey, look, by drinking this or by using that, look at the players did an amazing job. We won the championship, or whatever the story might be.
It's more brand associations for them as well. Everywhere.
Association and storytelling as well as much as. But then, if clearly on the business side of it, it's important for them to be able to generate revenue as well. So it kind of ticks a lot of boxes.
Yeah, if we are thinking of a drinking or even like an apparel or just like a fashion brand,
or more into if you're more into like motorsports and to B2B in like cybersecurity, data protection, just ways that kind of help protect teams, but give them use cases and case studies and able to sell to different things. So there's tons.
Then they have the brand equity showcase that, yeah, we have this client or this use case and we're great.
Exactly. So yeah, it's a very important part of it. I'd struggle to give a percentage, but it's important.
Yeah. Me, I just wanted to go back a bit on one thing you said is, and to pick up your brain on that is, okay, the partners or the brands come in and they have their objectives and everything, but on the other side of the table, and that's something else I want to ask you because you've been on both sides of the table, but for you, I wanted to ask you a bit, not prediction of the future, but how do you see the need for sports organizations to potentially evolve, or how they can make sure to meet the requirements not from new brands, but from new activations or new sorts of sponsorships, which are called today partnerships. But how do you see that in terms of, is there a gap? And if there is one, like how can sports organizations and rights owners be more in the shoes of the partners or trying to help them achieve their objectives?
Big question. Good question as well.
I'm not trying to put you on the grill. I mean, we're doing the same. I mean, we're trying to help sports organizations, or we're trying to help also brands to leverage new activations. And this is something also sometimes, in full transparency and honesty, you feel like there is two worlds, or they are not speaking the same languages, or they are not living within the same reality. So
yeah,
I was just curious to hear from you in terms of, okay, how do you manage, because you are in between those two, actually. You are representing, I mean, and you are trying to make it a win-win, as you were saying, but sometimes, you know, it's not the same language, not the same skills, not the same expectations. So how do you bridge the gap?
I guess the biggest difference is always certainly around digital and data, I think is the biggest difference, because if you look at the way brands invest their marketing these days, it is clearly driven by that, predominantly driven by digital, let's say. And generally, sports sponsorship offerings don't match up. If you look at the percentage of a brand, what they spend on digital versus what the percentage of the digital offering is in a sponsorship package, they won't match necessarily. So I think that's always the thing that you're trying to bridge. And there's not a one size fits all. I don't think it's just trying to accelerate the change. I think COVID has, as I mentioned earlier, has probably helped to some degree because sports have had to act quicker and develop things faster. But
what would be, I don't know the recipe, but what would be, if you have one or two tips in terms of, imagine I'm a federation or I'm a club like Reading, or obviously it depends on the resources you have internally, the objectives you have, and the brand you have and the competitions you are in. But imagine, I don't know if you are the FA, not necessarily a big one like the IOC or UEFA, but what would be the first 1-2 tips in terms of, okay, how can we make sure we bridge that gap, or we make ourselves relevant to the new demands of the sponsors, of the brands?
I guess even the way you talk about yourself is like talking the way a brand talks and just pitching in their language a little bit. And also customizing what you offer to brands as well. But that sounds stupid, but we see so many proposals that just, not even proposals, but decks that might be 20 pages about the sport and about their history and heritage, and which is interesting and okay, but it doesn't answer the question, how does that help? How does it help the brand? You need to get the brand's attention of, this is why you should sponsor us. It can help you sell X, Y, Z, or raise your brand, or just cut.
I am picturing you as you're talking in front of a deck, like you've just received, like, cool, that's cool for the historic classes or whatever, but I don't really care about that.
Yeah, I don't know. Do you find that as well? Do you see? I don't know. Have you?
Yeah, it's a bit like too much maybe on the history or the traditions, but on our side, it's more the, how do you activate, or how do you try to actually help sports organizations to leverage new technologies, or what you were saying in terms of data or the digital space in terms of making sure you drive ROI for these partners or for what you're trying to achieve, but at least you try to know exactly and to have some kind of a proof. But the thing is, usually people don't necessarily understand it. Or I would not be maybe with COVID, like you were saying, there has been clearly a change, and because people have had to activate with fans at home and all this kind of stuff, so they had to move to digital because they had to actually activate the partnership and to make sure that there is a win as well for the brands. But it's more, I think, it might go back to what you were saying in terms of culture as well. So I was thinking about it from you, because you've been within sports organizations and different ones in different sports, and now you're on the other side of the table. So I was just like curious to see, like, what's your take on how do you find it different, like being within a right owner or within a sports organization, and on the other side of the table being like representative of a brand or in a consultancy?
Yeah, it's a good question. I guess the frustration is that you can't impact change if you're talking to a rights owner. You can clearly advise and suggest things, but you can't necessarily impact change, which can be the frustration.
But are you free to say whatever you want, though?
Yeah, within reason, as long as, I'm English and I'm diplomatic, so that's fine.
As always.
But yeah, you can, and I guess that's the benefit, that you can advise people and say what you think. But I think it also, culture is a good point, and it goes back to having support within the organisation and someone at quite a senior level that might support and champion it, because people have a probably misconception about how complicated it is, and it's probably just a question of speaking to a few people, or even not necessarily agencies, but people you might know that can explain it and just explain what a simple strategy in sort of data and CRM strategy could help you do, and what you need to do, and try and break it down and make it a bit more digestible as well, rather than getting probably, scared off by it, but by it being too big almost.
Yeah, I see. I mean, I fully agree, and it's also funny I'm just at the start of my journey being on the other side of the table, but I would tend to agree with what you've said. If I'm pushing a bit and doing a bit of, not like crystal ball question, but Kel, I wanted to ask you a bit more for our listeners and even for myself, because I'm quite interested. It's like, how do you see the future for brands and sports organizations? I mean, you've talked a lot around data and the digital space and how COVID-19 has impacted it and accelerated things. But over the next months and years, what do you see, the relationship or like the partnerships be morphing into between those two entities?
I mean, generally, I see it as positive and healthy. And I think, again, not dominating everything with COVID, but COVID has shown how much people need sport and want sport. And that's only a positive thing for brands as well, because it helps them create an emotional connection with an audience. And that sport is one of the few things that can do that, and do it at scale as well. So I think generally it's kind of healthy, and you just feel people desperate to get back to sport with Euros coming soon, and then clearly Rugby League World Cup following soon after. But so I think generally healthy and desperate for sport to continue. In terms of how that looks between brands and rights owners, I think it just will continue to evolve as rights owners get smarter and have more advanced data, and how data and AI tools sort of go across all areas of the business. So I only see sort of positive things, but it's going to be sort of playing catch up a little bit. I still think the sort of rights owners playing catch up a bit.
Okay, because one thing you've said is, and that's why I think sports is within the entertainment industry. It's like sports is more than just sports. It's the social things where you create stories, and part of any entertainment business is you have these stories, you story tell them, and then you monetize them. But on the third piece, and which is the final stage, is okay, how brands can help rights holders to actually monetize those. Okay, guys. Thank you very much for this spot, Kevin. That was very much interesting. I don't know if you have any comments or remark as well.
No, just to say thank you both. It was good to have a chat, and sort of time has flown by, which is always a good thing. So no, it was good to chat with you both, and look forward to hearing the pod, and happy to answer any more questions that your listeners may have as well.
Cool. All right. So without further ado, I think I will end up here, and thank you everyone for listening to us, and we'll be back on soon with a new podcast in the future. Thanks everyone.
Cheers, guys. Cheers, Kevin.
Thanks very much.
Le Corner.